All right, Math Model, Semester 2, 1.41, the study solving quadratic equations. Okay, a quadratic equation is any equation where your graph is going to be a parabola. So you have y and x. So the parent function for a quadratic equation looks just like this, where for every value of x, it is squared in order to get y. One that you may be used to seeing more often is the linear equation, and a linear equation is where you have y and x, and a parent function is this line here, where it can be shifted up or down, left or right. Same thing with a quadratic, but the equation is going to be y equals to x. Okay, a quadratic equation is an equation that has or could be simplified to the standard form. Okay, it's going to have the form ax squared plus b, x plus c equals 0. Or if you don't understand what I wrote, just look right here, because it's the same thing. All right, summarizing. Fill in the blanks to complete the definition. A quadratic equation is an equation that has or could be simplified to have the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so a practice one, how to solve a quadratic equation. Your first step is that you want to factor the polynomial. So we got 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0. It's actually kind of like a cheat sheet because you have what it can be factored to right there in step 3. So I'm just going to go ahead and write these up at the top. So we have 2x plus 3 times x plus 1. Anytime you don't see a multiplication there, but instead you see those parentheses, know that you are multiplying. All right, so when we write each factor as an equation equal to 0, we're going to have 2x plus 3 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. And solving for x, we move the 3 over by subtraction, and then the last step is to divide by 2. So we have x equals a negative 3/2, and x plus 1 equals 0, so we subtract 1 on both sides, so x equals a negative 1. So the solution to the factor equations are the solutions to the quadratic equation. So x equals a negative 3/2, and x equals a negative 1. That should be a negative right there. Okay, step 5 says use substitution to check your solutions. Plug each solution into the original equation. Check that it makes the equation equal 0. Okay, so the first one I'll plug in is x equals a negative 1, where I see an x value. So we'll do 2. Let's see. 2. Okay, everywhere you see an x, plug in a negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 squared plus 5 times negative 1 plus 8, and it should equal 0. So 2 times the negative 1 squared is just 2, and then 5 times negative 1 is minus 5 plus 8 equals 0. So right here we have a negative 3 plus 8 equals 0. So it ended up being 5. Alright. Okay, this side over here you have a fraction, but it's still doable. So we got 2 times, and it's a negative 3/2. Everywhere you see an x, plug in a negative 3/2. Plus 5 times negative 3/2 plus 8. That whole thing had to equal 0. So we use the exponent first. 0. Well, that's a 0 equals, and then a negative times a negative is positive. So this first part right here is going to be positive because we got negative times a negative. So you got 2 times a negative 3 squared is 9 over 2 plus, well, minus, because a negative 3 times 5 is 15. So negative 15 over 2 plus 8. I chose to do mine by hand, so you have 0 equals 18 over 2 minus 15 over 2. Wait a minute, something not right. Should have been a 4. We squared it. This should have been a 4 right there. So this would have been a 4 right there. Minus 15 over 2 plus 8. Okay, so 0 would equal 18 over 4 minus 30 over 4, because we had to have a common denominator, plus 8. So 0 is going to be a negative 12 over 4 plus 8. So it's going to equal a negative 3 plus 8, which is the same 5. And since those two numbers match up here, whoops, we know we got the right answer, where they both equal 5. Okay, so the main idea is that if a quadratic equation is not in standard form, you can use algebra to change it into standard form. So the first one you have not in standard form is x squared plus 3x plus 7 equal 5. Don't do that. And you subtract 5 on both sides. What you do to one side, make sure you do to the other side. And so you'll end up with x squared plus 3x plus 2, because 7 minus 5 is 0. Okay, the next one you have to do a little bit more manipulating to. And I'll put it over here. You have x squared minus 2 equals a negative 2x squared plus 5x. So you can subtract x squared and also add 2 at the same time. So what's going to happen? These are going to cancel out. It's going to be 0. So that's my same 0 that I have here. And it's going to be a negative 2x minus x squared is a negative 3x squared. And then we have the same 5x plus 2. Can't put those together because they don't have like terms. And then the last one here, the last one, x plus 3 squared, is the same thing as x plus 3 times x plus 3 plus 4x. So that's x squared plus 6x plus 9 plus 4x. So your final answer here would be x squared plus 10x plus 9. Okay, the main idea is if a quadratic equation is a perfect square trinomial not equal to 0, it can be easier to solve it if it's not in standard form. So how to solve a perfect square trinomial equation? Factor the perfect square trinomial. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 can be rewritten as, let's see, x squared plus 4x plus 4 can be rewritten as x plus 2 times x plus 2, which can also be rewritten as x plus 2 squared. So we have x plus 2 squared there. And then it says take the square root of both sides. It's the only way to get rid of a square. So on the left side, you'll be left with just x plus 2. And then simplify the resulting equations would be to move the 2 to the other side. So it would just be a minus 2 on both sides. So x plus 2 equals the square root of 6 becomes the square root of 6 minus 2. And then x plus 2 equals a negative square root of 6 becomes the negative square root of 6 minus 2. Next step is to solve the quadratic equation by moving the 2 to the other side. So you're going to have 12x squared minus 2x minus 4 equals 0. Looking at all of your coefficients, they all are a factor of 2. So you can factor out a 2. So you'll be left with 6x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. If you have a 2 on the outside, you can divide both sides by 2. So when you divide 0 by 2, it's just 0. So that'll leave you with 6x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. The 2 go away because both sides get divided by 2. Alright, the next step is to factor. So I'm going to draw a line right here. So 6x squared minus x minus 2 could be factored to 3x minus 2 times 2x plus 1. The next step will be to solve each of those for x, setting them equal to 0. So 3x minus 2 equals 0, and 2x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, I'll do this side first. So we have 3x equals 2, moving a negative 2 over, and then divide by 3. So x equals 2/3. That's one of the answers. Alright, the other one would be to solve over here. 2x equals, move this one over, you have negative 1, and x will equal a negative 1 divided by 2. Okay, number 2, x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 2. You can see a perfect square right here. So those can be factored to x plus 5, and x plus 5 equals to 2. X plus 5 times x plus 5 is nothing more than x plus 5 squared equals 2. So the only way to get rid of a square is to square root both sides. So x plus 5 equals the square root of 2. To get rid of the 5, you subtract by 5 on both sides. So x can equal the square root of 2, negative square root of 2 minus 5, or x can equal the positive square root of 2 minus 5. So that's going to be your two answers right here, your two solutions.